Welcome back to part 2 of a history of the South End grounds. If you missed part 1, click the card in the corner to catch up. Other than that, like, comment, hype, and subscribe, and let's get back into it. Now a baseball team with no home, the Beaneaters began playing their ballgames at an abandoned American Association ballpark over on Congress Street while Arthur Soden figured out how to rebuild his own grounds. Remember how Soden's legacy is one of frugality? Well, to save a bit of money, he cut corners on the insurance for his grand pavilion, having the nearly $100,000 facility insured for a mere $45,000. Shortchanging himself, he in no way could afford to rebuild the grandstand in its old fashion, choosing a much more simplified version instead. The rebuilding of the ballpark commenced as soon as possible and was impressively completed by mid-July. The layout once again remained similar, with the main grandstand behind home plate and bleachers on the flanks. The grandstand this time around featured just one level of seating. The roof was simple, adorned with flags, but not much else. Pie-shaped bleachers were erected in right center, and when the ballpark reopened for business on July 20th, it featured a capacity of 5,000. Not all was bad either, as spectators soon were complimenting improved seating comfort and sightlines from the ballpark's previous iteration. With the New York Giants coming to town, 4,256 fans made their way to the game to christen the new ballpark. Enjoying what was likely a hot July day, they watched the Beaneaters dominate the day to the tune of a 12-1 final. They had a remarkable season, finishing with an 83-49-1 record, but ultimately in just third place, their pennant streak having died with their old grandstand. It took a few seasons at the new South End grounds to find their championship form again. That came during the 1897 season, in the form of a 93-39-3 campaign that saw them barely snatch the pennant away from the Orioles by just 2 games. Despite winning the league for a record 7th time, they were matched up with the Orioles to play an exhibition series called the Temple Cup. Running since 1894, the Temple Cup had lost the attention of the baseball fandom by the 1897 season, and that year's iteration was doomed to be the last. Game 1 was on October 4th in Boston, where an estimated 10,000 fans attended the game. In an article about the 1897 Temple Cup published by Sabre, Bill Felber postulates that such a large crowd showing was to pay tribute to the team for their regular season effort, rather than to cheer them on in the series. Neither team seemed to take the game seriously, and Boston made a comeback in the 9th to win the game as darkness fell. That would be the only game that the Beaneaters would take in this series. The next 2 games were played at the South End grounds, with diminishing crowds of 6,000 and 2,000 fans coming to see the Orioles win both affairs. With a few days off to travel, Game 4 was picked up in Baltimore in front of another weak crowd of 2,000, seeing the Beaneaters make a frantic comeback late in the game before falling short. Then, the following day, the Orioles finished off the series in front of a measly crowd of 700 people. Just 2 weeks prior, the two teams had played a decisive regular season series in Baltimore in which an estimated 25,000 people attended the final game. The final Temple Cup went out with a whimper for both the fans and the players, nobody taking it seriously anymore. The league returned to its regular format in 1898, as well as increasing the length of the season to 154 games, a mark that would last for over 6 decades. Despite adding games to the schedule, the owners, likely intentionally, did not increase the pay of the players. This led to several star players holding out early in the season, including a couple from Boston. Despite these developments and hurdles, the Beaneaters gave it one more good go, finishing the season with a record of 102, 47-3. They claimed the pennant by 6 games over the Orioles. That was their 5th National League pennant of the 1890s, and their 8th overall. An unprecedented run of dominance that ultimately was at its end. The 1898 National League pennant was the last one ever won on Walpole Street. At the turn of the century, the Beaneaters had been the darlings of Boston for 3 decades. All of that changed in 1901. A new league was forming, one that would rise as a permanent challenger to the National League, and they understood how lucrative of a location Boston was for another professional team. The American League was declared a major league, the Boston Americans established, and a location for a new ballpark picked out. It just so happened that the chosen spot was just across the railroad tracks from the South End grounds. Ground broke for the new ballpark to be known as the Huntington Avenue grounds on March 9th, and it was fully completed in less than 2 months. Built at a cost of $35,000, it was noticeably nicer than its National League counterpart. What was even worse, when it opened up, Arthur Soden's American League counterpart charged about half of what he did to get in the door. A new era of baseball was dawning in Boston. Everything came quickly to a head. By 1903, the Beaneaters were wallowing at the bottom of their league, while the Americans were dominating theirs. In just their 3rd season of operation, the new Boston franchise went an astonishing 91-47-3, taking the upstart league by a massive 14.5 games over the Philadelphia Athletics. Ahead of the season, the 2 major leagues had decided to call truce and schedule a championship series between their 2 pennant winners. A championship series that would stick. A World Series. And it was coming to Boston. Not to the heart of Boston baseball for the past 30 years, but to its shiny new neighbor. Behind dominant pitching from GOAT hurler Cy Young, the Americans pulled an upset in that first World Series. In photos, the South End grounds looks like a child in timeout, sulking behind the smoke. Things only got worse for the Beaneaters, diminishing year over year until they bottomed out with a 49-102-1 record, hosting only 143,280 fans at their iconic grounds in 1906. Following the season, Arthur Soden threw in the towel. For 30 years, his shadow lingered over the franchise. A roller coaster ride of a tenure, complete with dramatic triumphs and terrible tragedy. In the end, he went out diminished, his franchise clearly eclipsed by its young neighbor. In came one George Dovey to take charge. Purchasing the Beaneaters on November 28th, one of his first orders of business was to rename the team in his honor. Starting in 1907, the Boston National League team would be known as the Doves. He updated the ballpark with a new scoreboard in 1907, and the on-the-field product improved noticeably. The team still sucked, but they did see a 9-game improvement from 1906 and a move up to 7th place from 8th. Dovey went about improving the ballpark again in 1908, adding a significant amount of bleacher seating along the outfield perimeter. Once it was installed, the ballpark saw capacity increase to roughly 10,000 seats, and the team saw further improvement, up to 63 wins and a 6th place finish in 08. Things were looking up on Walpole Street. Just as the vibes were improving, the bottom fell out. The team got off to a horrible start to the 1909 season. After an afternoon loss to the Cardinals on June 19th, the Doves sat in an abysmal 13-34. What was worse was the news they received after the game. Their owner since late 1906, George Dovey, had died in a train accident. Ownership of the franchise transitioned to his brother John, who had helped his now-deceased brother in running the team. Devastated, the team finished out the year with just 45 wins. A franchise that had spent decades competing for National League pennants found itself unable to climb out of the league's cellar. stuck in a perpetual cycle of pain. The pennant-winning successes of the 1890s now just distant memories, like ghosts haunting the grounds. After another miserable campaign in 1910, John Dovey sold the franchise to John P. Harris. Harris, serving as a caretaker owner, purchased the team on November 15th and sold them on December 17th. The buyer was an attorney by the name of William Hepburn Russell. And just like George Dovey before him, Russell decided to rename the team in his own honor, calling them the Rustlers. Unfortunately for Russell and his Rustlers, his ownership tenure lasted less than a full year when he passed away on November 11, 1911. His assets transferred to his estate, from which James Gaffney purchased the team and ballpark in the middle of 1912. He quickly ditched the Rustlers moniker and gave them what to this day is the franchise's nickname, the Braves. Gaffney went about making changes to the South End grounds, removing bleacher seating in left field, and slightly rotating the field to create a bigger outfield. Under his ownership, the franchise was able to stabilize. The Braves ended their 1912 season with a dismal 52 wins, before seeing a massive improvement of 17 games the next year, ending with 69 wins. From there, they rocketed to success. Out of nowhere in 1914, the Braves became a formidable foe, finishing the year 94, 59, and 5, their first winning season since 1902, and their first pennant since 1898. But that pennant was not celebrated at their historic grounds on Walpole Street. Rather, it was celebrated in the much newer Fenway Park. Before the season even started, Gaffney began considering serious renovations to modernize the South End grounds. As he was exploring his options, president of the Boston AL team, now called the Red Sox, offered up his new ballpark for the Braves to use. Gaffney accepted tentatively, playing there on a part-time basis, utilizing the much larger facility to draw crowd sizes that just weren't possible at their own grounds. On August 11th, the Braves hosted the Reds at the South End grounds. 8,000 fans attended what would end up being a scoreless tie that was called after 13 innings. The two teams were set to play again the next day, but it was rained out. Following the cancellation, the Braves went on a long road trip, only returning to Boston in early September. By the time they returned, they were deep in a pennant race and desired to take advantage of the interest they were drawing. Realizing the much larger crowds they could draw at Fenway, Gaffney decided to permanently abandon the South End grounds. That 13-inning scoreless draw ended up being the unceremonious end to what was ultimately a legendary baseball grounds. Now a relic, charming yet outdated. The Braves, as mentioned earlier, closed out their franchise's 9th National League pennant that fall and earned themselves a spot in their first World Series against the A's. They would go on to sweep their American League foes and claim their first modern World Series. Gaffney had a new ballpark built for the team, and they never looked back. The South End grounds was quickly and quietly demolished following the season. No real regard being paid to the tremendous baseball history the land had observed. The Braves remained in Boston until 1953, when they moved to Milwaukee and eventually to Atlanta, where they remain today. Their original ballpark now simply features a parking garage, part of Northeastern University, and an MBTA transfer station. The only marker noting the significant history of the land is a plaque at the transfer station denoting the location of the ballpark. The city of Boston has moved on, and the Braves franchise has moved on. But the impact of the South End grounds remains. As of the writing of this video, the Braves franchise has won 18 National League pennants in the over 150-year history of the league, and 8 of those were claimed on Walpole Street near the boundary between Roxbury and the South End. To this day, those grounds remain the longest tenured ballpark the franchise has ever inhabited, The South End grounds were around for the organization of professional baseball, and saw the mass production of the automobile and the invention of the airplane. By the time it was abandoned, armies in Europe were mobilizing to begin World War I. Gone so long now, it's been steamrolled by 100 years of time and progress. The ghosts of baseball's origins are all that's left. But the memory of the South End grounds remains as well, and deserves to be kept, as it truly was baseball's first Grand Palace. Thank you for joining me on this long, wonderful history of the South End grounds. If you enjoyed this documentary, make sure to like the video and comment your favorite memory of Braves or Boston baseball. If you want to enjoy more work like this from the Bad Baseball Fan, make sure you hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. If you want more ways to support the channel, consider buying some Bad Baseball Fan merch or joining the channel as a member. Anyways, I'll see you next time, and remember, if you like baseball, like this video and subscribe for more.